Are you ready to dive in on what I've learned growing a business since I was 24 and I'm now 29? Basically, celebrating our 5th year anniversary. So, in this video, I want it to be a little bit different. That's why I'm sitting down, not in my usual like standing up mode when I'm doing these videos. I'm just on my workspace and I was going through like, hey, what video do I want to create for? This is usually my Sunday video. And I was like going through doing SEO research and all that fun stuff. And then I was also sitting and thinking like, hey, it's been 5 years. Literally today. I'm filming this on October 16, 2024. And I'm like, hey, this is like 5 years since I got our first ever paid invoice. And that's essentially like got me inspired into thinking about a lot of things. I'm like, hey, I would have done this differently when I started my business. I would have started this earlier, would have done this earlier. So I wanted to do a video on what it's like growing a business for the last 5 years of my life, basically in my 20s. And this is my last year in my 20s. And I turned 29 like 2 weeks ago. So I'm like thinking through and wanting to reflect and kind of walk you guys through a little bit of that journey as well of lessons, hard lessons I learned the very, very hard way, as well as things that I would actually change, but always keeping in mind that whatever I would have changed before wouldn't have brought me to the lessons that I would know to change later on. So it's kind of a cool little paradox. So the first 5 things, and the 5 things that I wish I knew, the first lesson on that is it is really all about people. And this is something that I knew going in, but in the day-to-day when it comes to running a business, when it comes to balancing, making sure we had enough money to pay people and taking care of the people to pay, it's always a delicate like balance that I have to constantly feel like I have to figure out. It's constantly something that I'm trying to see like, hey, do I want to do this or do I want to do that? Do I want to spend $1,000 making sure that people feel loved and taken care of on this one activity, on this one event, versus like, hey, we might be $1,000 short next month. So it's that delicate balance, but I have to constantly keep reminding myself like, hey, it's all about the people. Like whatever I invest back to our peeps go back to me. And at the same time, like, it's also all about making sure that people are taken care of in the best way. Now, this is a lesson that I learned the hard way when we were about to hit 3 years into XU, where I was managing about 20 executive assistants. I was still doing it on my own. I didn't have a manager. I was managing them. I was managing our marketing team. I was managing our recruitment team. So I was kind of like spread really thin. I think I was managing, at that time we had like 24 employees. I was managing all 23 employees because I was the 24th employee. And that led to a lot of miscommunication. That led to a lot of things falling through the cracks. That led to me not seeing what was in front of me because, again, I was managing too many things all at once in my head. So that's kind of that was a really hard lesson to learn, mostly because then that caused to a lot of really amazing people leaving to XU. That led to me having to go through a little bit of breakdown almost every day of like, oh, what am I doing wrong? Like, do you just suck as a boss? And looking back at that now, at that 20, how old was I? 26-year-old Leanne, when she was going through that, I would have just given her a hug. I'm like, girl, you need to hire a manager. That would have been what I would do, because like I could be, the main person that's pushing a lot of things, but if I don't have the right people in place to help me execute and manage people, then it's gonna be all for naught. And like I said, that was one of the hardest lessons that I had to learn. Mostly because, like I said, and you guys probably have seen them. If you've seen previous videos of 2XU, you've seen a lot of the pioneering EAs that we had. They were fantastic. They were amazing. And I basically just mismatched them. That was kind of the hardest thing. It's like going back again to the people, of like making sure you're focused on your people, you're focused on growing them, because and this is something that I've always believed in, is like if you focus on having the right people with you, the money will just come in, because you will have people who are happy, who will stay, who will want to keep referring other people into the business as well. So if I had to go back and tell myself that, of like, hey, the moment you hit 7 EAs, you should have hired a manager, that would have been kind of one of the prime lessons that I would have taught myself at that point. And that's something that I'm carrying with me moving forward. Right after that, we hired our first manager in 2XU. We now have 3 managers in 2XU. We're hiring for more. And I'm always constantly making sure that those managers feel fully supported, because they're fully supporting the people who are essentially our client facing EAs. So I keep going back to like people first, get really good managers because they will catapult everyone else forward as well. And it's also the lesson of I don't have to do it on my own. It's just, I guess the second lesson is that's the thing with being a hyper independent eldest Asian kid is I still do try to do everything on my own, and that's a mistake that I've seen so many other people create or make themselves, which is why 2XU, like, hey, you don't have to do things on your own. But that was something that I lessened that I had to learn myself, is I had to kind of come to terms to the fact where just because I can do it doesn't mean I have to be the person doing it. And it's such a hard lesson to learn when you are a solopreneur, when you started it on your own, is you tend to not always be willing to give up control. You're always not willing to, like, hey, I created this, everything from scratch, so everything has to be dependent on me, right? But in reality, it's not. It's like that's how you take yourself down into a rabbit hole, basically, of just spiraling through hiring different people who are just not good enough. But in reality, if you can delegate like 80% of it, you can kind of keep teaching that person how to do it. And keep giving them feedback. And the cool thing about giving the thing that you love to do basically to someone else is that they can also give you feedback of like, hey, what if we tried this? What if we did this? Things that you would have not thought about, just because as an entrepreneur, you would not think like, hey, what if we did this, because you're focused on 3 other things within the business. So that's one that I have loved and welcomed, is getting myself to the point where like, hey, I'm now at capacity at this role. How can I delegate this to someone else? And that was basically around the time that we hired our first client success manager within 2XU, where we finally had someone who was taking care of our clients, and it wasn't just me, who was actually more awesome than me when it comes to building relationships with our clients, with making sure that they're communicating well back and forth with their EAs. So that's one of the lessons that basically, I don't have to do it all by myself, even though it's really tempting to just do it all by myself, because again, that sense of I want to control things, because I want to make sure that this is done right. And whenever you give something to someone else, it's like, oh, it's now kind of up to them. It's still to me, but it's kind of up to them. That basically overly grown self-responsibility feeling, basically. And it was a lesson that I had to learn. It's like, now I can trust the people. Well, I do trust our people to do the right thing, to show up in the best way, to not have things fall through the cracks, because that's their only focus. They're not like me, where I'm focused like on 5 different things. I've given one of my focus to them so that I could just focus on 3 things instead of the 5 things, as an example. So that's one where I really still love thinking through that, of thinking of realizing like, hey, just because I started this business alone doesn't mean that I have to grow it alone. And it's been amazing and fantastic to have grown our admin team into 2XU the way that we have in the last couple of years. And we keep growing. So it's been very fun and very, I guess, also creative inducing, because the more the people that I have, then I can think of creative ways of like, hey, what if we implemented this? What if we started this? What if we did this for the business? It's kind of opened my own brain up, instead of like trying to make things, make sure that everything is right. I'm also thinking of ways of like, hey, what if we tested this out? What if we played around with this kind of thing inside of the business, and then we exited? It's amazing. Sometimes it's not. So then we reiterate and we do it better every single time. So that was basically people and management, essentially. Second one is I don't have to do it on my own. A third really good one is to basically to learn how to network. And this is outside of 2XU, and this is coming from a person who knew how important networking is, or basically I knew the importance of how to network right and how to do it well. I've read all the books, I've watched all the TED Talks, I've studied it so hard. But I think because in my head I've created this narrative like, oh, I'm an introvert, like I don't want to network with people, that's not my forte. That was a mistake that I did for myself. I basically locked myself into that persona, into that story of like, hey, I'm not good at networking. But in reality, I'm fantastic at networking. I'm fantastic at making friends, at making connections, at doing collaborations. So one of the reasons why I've been able to grow 2XU to this point is because I've been collaborating, or because I'm just like a good friend to people as well. And the first thought is like, hey, we need someone to speak at this event. Hey, let's tag Leanne onto this. Just because, again, I've created that connection, I've created that relationship, and I created that relationship. I'm not doing it to get something back later on. I'm just genuinely there to basically be their friend. Or to learn more about what they do, or to be curious about more of how they're growing and how they're doing it. Because to be honest, and a lot of people have said this, so it's not really a revelation, entrepreneurship is really, really lonely. Like, I have my friends, I have the amazing team at 2XU, I have my co-founders, also fantastic, but in reality of that, it's very lonely to kind of think about like, hey, this is my journey. Like, and there's also that shyness of, do I share this really hard thing that I'm going through right now to people, or should I keep it to myself? I'm like, to keep it to myself, then how am I going to fully process it? So this kind of like a tug of war thing, and learning how to network, learning how to become friends with people, to learn and know other entrepreneurs as well. You guys have seen them probably on the 2XU podcast, the friends that I've made along the way, has been kind of really freeing, because then I've learned how to be vulnerable. I've learned how to reach out basically when I do need help from someone outside of 2XU. And I've also learned how to fully understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur, because I'm learning from all of these lessons from other people as well, which is why I also wanted to make this video. Is hopefully as you're watching this, as you're going through the lessons that I've learned, is you'll realize, or some of them will kind of echo back in your head, for lack of a better term, and you're like, oh, okay, so I'm not the only one going through that, which is why I like doing videos like this from time to time. But this is fully not scripted. I'm thinking of these things as they pop up in my head. Like I said, I was supposed to do some completely other video, but I'm doing this just because I do want to share it. Plus, who knows, 10-15 years down the line, when I have my own kids, and they're wanting to become an entrepreneur myself, maybe they're watching this as well, hopefully being able to inspire them as well. That does bring me a little bit to my next point, which is with the fourth point. I think we're up to 4, where it's all about your mentors. And I have been really, really, really fortunate and lucky that I met my co-founder when I was 18. He used to be my boss, basically. He was my first full-time job. I was a book editor, which is a dream job when you love books. I was a book editor for his publishing company. It was a startup, so I rose really, really quickly, became manager, head of marketing. And then when he asked, like, hey, we're training someone up to become CEO because we're starting another business, who wants to do it? Raised my hand. I was 19 years old, became CEO, did my whole training basically. By the time I was 20, I was running already the book publishing company. That whole time he was training me. He was making sure that he was available when I needed help, when I was stuck on certain things, because of course I didn't know what I didn't know. And throughout, when I started 2XU, when I was about 23, 24, I said like, hey, the publishing company now runs without me. I want to start my own business. And instead of me leaving, I basically ended up partnering with him, just because he had a lot of the structure already of like having the US corporation. I don't have to figure out all that. And of course he had the mentorship, basically, and ongoing wisdom and knowledge. That has been an amazing experience for me, was being able to have essentially a business dad, and that's what I call him. He's my white business dad because he's American. That has propelled me forward more than anyone that I've really gotten to know. Like anytime that I've gotten to know other entrepreneurs my age, and they didn't have that wisdom and like having that support group, basically, it's been a little bit harder for them. And it was cool because like with my co-founder Tom, he has currently still, he has a son, Garrick. You guys probably have seen him in some of my videos here, and we're the same age. So when Garrick started his business and I started my business, we kind of grew together into the business owners that we are now. So that was also pretty cool. And then aside from Tom and aside from Garrick also, I've also gotten coaches like my amazing coach, Dan McPherson. I already also interviewed him on the podcast. I've had people that I've looked up to. Like I look up to Miss Flair, Miss Connie, again, also has been on the 2XU podcast. And these people kind of kept inspiring me to be better, to do better, and to constantly up my own game. So it wasn't like I was in competition with them. I was in competition with myself, because I've seen a lot of these mentors. I've seen a lot of what they do. They've pushed me like, hey, what if I think about this way, or what if I do this one thing differently? And of course, I've had books, I've had courses, I've had podcasts that I listen to, and those have, as well as have propelled me to where I am basically. So having a really good mentor or a set of people that you follow who have what you want and been where you are, that's always my advice, is when you're looking for a mentor, they have to have what you want, you know, what your goal in life, your lifestyle, whether it's something that they have, and as well as been where you are. And that's an important key thing to think about, is they need to have been gone through at least something that you're going through. So that's why, funny enough, with like Tom and Garrett, even though they're Americans, they understand what it's like to struggle. They understand what it's like to go through depression. They understand what it's like to start from scratch. So for them, they were my perfect mentors at that time. And the same thing with all of the other mentors I've met in my life, is they have some aspect to them of a life that I want, and then an aspect to them that they've gone through where I was. So they've kind of helped me build better the narrative that I had also for myself, so that I can get myself to where I am. And I guess the last big lesson that I learned in the last 5 years of running 2XU is that you just have to keep going. And as cliche as that sounds, there are hard days when you're an entrepreneur. There are days where I don't want to get up, where there's when I dread sometimes, but I know there's a hard conversation to do, when I know that there's maybe a client call where you have to talk about something really difficult. But you just have to keep going. Like, I am learning to be more confrontational, to be lack of a term. Not really confrontational. It's more of being more comfortable in having the hard conversations. I've gotten better than, you know, the people-pleasing girl that I was when I was 23, 24. I've gotten better so much from that girl. But I'm still learning how to be comfortable basically in being uncomfortable, and basically to just keep going with it. And it's something that I know a lot of people struggle with, and I know it's something that a lot of people aren't instantly like, I'm really good at this. They might have also gone through the same revelations that I'm going through right now. But it is that, like, even when it's hard, even when you don't want to show up, it's okay to rest. Like, I encourage a lot of people to rest, encourage people to take a break. But when it comes to, if you just want to take a break because it's going to be a difficult conversation, when you think like, hey, I don't want to go through this day, then that's when you know you have to push. And this really amazing, literally 20-page book, and it's called The Flinch, that I like to reread on my own from time to time. It talks about like the moment that you feel a flinch, like, oh, I don't want to do that. That's when you should probably barrel through that. That's probably when you should probably jump. And one of my favorite memories of doing that was, I've done bungee jumping twice. And it's only like, it's literally 20 meters down, really scary, really terrifying. It's at a water park though. And whenever I did that, I remember that part of the book, like just because it's making you flinch, just jump through that and things will work out anyway. So it's kind of like different mindset shifts that I've had over the years, is like keeping that in mind, of keeping the lessons that I've learned myself in mind. And I hope this was something that was really good for you guys, because again, this is kind of a different kind of a vibe kind of video. Not scripted at all. Those 5 things just popped into my mind, and that's kind of how I wanted to set it up anyway. And I'm really happy. I'm really proud of the last 5 years of 2XU. It has not grown in the way that I thought it would. At this point, I thought we would have like 100 employees. We'd be like have our own like big office, different cities. But I know that I had to go through all of those lessons, so I can't be the person who has 100 employees with different offices. I have to give myself a lot of credit a lot of the time of like, hey, I did start this when I was pretty young. I had no idea what I didn't know. I'm pretty proud of how far we've come, and I'm pretty proud and pretty grateful of all the people who have come across 2XU. Every single applicant we've had, every single employee we've hired, the current ones that we have are fantastic. We need a lot of help, but we're getting it basically. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, make sure to hit that like button right there. Comment below if you have any thoughts or questions. I would love to know. And if you still haven't yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button right there so you don't miss any of my videos every Sunday and Thursday on how to work from home and how to love business from home, which of course you guys can check out right here and the latest video right here. I hope you guys have an amazing day, and remember that small steps matters, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.